Something is happening to you, and you haven't realized it yet. You pray, you try, you put in the effort, but your life isn't moving forward. It's like something invisible is holding you back. And no, the problem isn't a lack of effort. Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right and still nothing moves? Like there's a silent barrier keeping you stuck, even though you're trying, seeking God, pushing every single day. On the outside, everything seems under control, but inside, there's a kind of exhaustion no one sees, a constant unrest. And the hardest part is realizing that while you're fighting to move forward, other people seem to be living in a completely different flow. Over time, that starts to weigh on you. Cycles repeating, doors that almost open but never fully do. And without even noticing, a thought begins to rise inside you. Has God forgotten me? It's quiet, but it's real. It's like running on a treadmill. You put in the effort, you stay committed, but you're still in the same place. And this doesn't just affect your results. It starts to affect your faith, your identity, the way you see life. And there's something even more serious in all of this. Staying stuck for too long begins to change who you are. You start to doubt yourself, lose confidence, begin to settle for less than what you were created to live. Because the greatest danger isn't being stuck for a season, it's starting to believe that this is normal. But what almost no one realizes is that there are barriers you can't see. Unresolved wounds, fears that have been silently building, an identity shaped by old pain. And this is exactly where something begins to be revealed. Because the Bible shows the story of someone who was carrying all of this inside without even realizing it. And when you understand that story, you begin to understand yours too. The invisible weight you never chose to carry. In Genesis 35:16-18, Benjamin's birth was not surrounded by celebration, but by deep pain. Rachel, his mother, goes into labor on the journey and, in her final moments, gives her son a name filled with suffering, Benoni, which means son of my sorrow. It was as if that child was already born, marked by a story he did not write. But Jacob, his father, intervenes and changes his name to Benjamin, son of the right hand, trying to redefine that destiny from the very beginning. Two names, two identities, and a silent conflict that begins right there. It is exactly at this point that Benjamin's story connects with the lives of many people today who carry feelings, beliefs, and pain that did not begin with them, but were placed there early on, by family, by circumstances, by experiences. It's like carrying a heavy backpack you never chose, but that has been on your back since the beginning of your life. And the deepest part of all this is that a person doesn't always question it. They simply accept it and live this way. But how much has this been holding your life back without you even realizing it? Are the things you feel today really something that started in you, or were they placed in you long ago? The inherited fear that silences your progress. Genesis 42:36 shows that Jacob, still marked by the loss of Joseph, reveals a heart consumed by fear when he says that everything seemed to be against him. This fear doesn't stay only within him. It overflows into the way he sees the future, especially when it involves Benjamin. Without realizing it, he projects the pain of the past onto his youngest son, as if the story were destined to repeat itself. Benjamin, in turn, grows up within this atmosphere, carrying an emotional weight that did not begin in him, but that starts to shape his possibilities. This is not far from our reality today. How many people live limited by fears that were never theirs? Fear of trying, of trusting, of moving forward. All of it coming from stories that began in someone else. It's like inheriting an emotional debt that was never yours to begin with, but that you have to pay every day through insecurity and paralysis. And the most delicate part is that this becomes so natural that a person no longer questions it. But is the fear that holds you back today really something that started in you? Or are you living a story someone else wrote? without ever realizing that you could step out of it. If this biblical story of Benjamin is speaking to you, type, "I need to break free" in the comments. And save this video, because what comes next can change the way you see yourself. When leaving stops being an option and becomes a necessity. Genesis 43:13-14. There comes a point when scarcity tightens its grip, and Jacob can no longer keep Benjamin in the same place. Hunger forces a decision that fear had been postponing. With a divided heart, he lets his son go, entrusting him to an uncertain but necessary path. The one who was always protected now has to step into a new environment, far from his father's control. It's a quiet moment, but filled with meaning. Something begins to change not only around him, but within Benjamin's own story. Sometimes in our lives, there are seasons that don't begin while we insist on staying where we've always been. Familiar environments bring comfort, but they can also keep everything at the same level. There is growth that only happens when there is movement, when there is the courage to leave, even with fear. It's like a seed kept stored away. It may be safe, but it will never grow there. And then a question rises that changes everything. What in your life would only begin if you had the courage to leave? And why, until now, have you remained in the same place? The pressure that reveals who you really are. Genesis 44. In Egypt, Joseph creates an unexpected situation by placing his cup in Benjamin's bag, bringing the youngest son into the center of an intense tension. Suddenly, the one who was always protected finds himself facing an accusation that made no sense, surrounded by an environment of injustice and pressure. There was no way out, no immediate explanation, just a moment that demanded reaction, posture, and identity. What was hidden begins to be revealed, not only in Benjamin, but in everyone around him. This story creates a contrast between the past and the present, because these are exactly the moments many people interpret as stagnation, as being stuck, when in reality, they are a revelation. Difficult situations don't arise just to wound, but to expose what was already inside: strength or fear, maturity or dependence. Pressure doesn't create something new, it reveals what already exists. And this is where a sensitive point emerges. When life tightens, what has been coming out of you? Are these seasons really holding you back? Or are they trying to show you something you still haven't been willing to see? When the invisible becomes essential. In Genesis 45, the scriptures bring light to our understanding and allow us to see what is really happening. At the moment when Joseph finally reveals himself to his brothers, all the built-up tension reaches a turning point, and Benjamin is there, at the center of it all. Without him, that encounter would not have happened the same way, nor would Joseph's heart have been moved in the way necessary for reconciliation. The one who once seemed to be just the youngest, the most protected, now proves to be essential for the story to move forward and be completed. What once seemed secondary had, in fact, always been a central part of a greater purpose that was only now beginning to become clear. In life, many people feel left behind, as if they are always one step behind, without understanding the reason for so much waiting. But there are processes that don't make sense at the beginning, only at the right moment. It's like pieces that are kept aside until the end of a puzzle. They seem irrelevant until suddenly they become indispensable. And then comes a reflection that shifts everything. Are you really behind, or are you being prepared for something that would only make sense at the right time? Could what hasn't happened yet be positioning you for something greater than you imagine? Benjamin's story reveals something many people take a long time to realize. God works in ways that don't always make sense at the beginning. What seemed like pain at birth, overprotection, and even moments of pressure were, in fact, parts of a process being carried out with precision. When the moment comes for Jacob to release Benjamin to go to Egypt, it is not just a human decision. It is a movement aligned with something greater. And in that moment, even without understanding everything, Benjamin allows himself to be led. And without realizing it, he begins to step into the place God had already prepared. This changes everything. Because maybe what has been holding your life back is not a lack of ability, but a resistance to trusting the way God is leading your story. Sometimes He is asking for a step, a release, a change, and fear tries to hold you back. Old stories, unresolved pain, thoughts that didn't even begin with you. All of this can be muffling the direction God is already trying to show you. And while this is not confronted, life continues without clear progress. There is a truth that needs to be absorbed. You were not created to live stuck, but to live aligned with God. And that alignment begins when you choose to look honestly within, identify what has been holding you back, question the weights you've been carrying without realizing it, and, most importantly, allow God to lead you into places you would never have had the courage to go on your own. Because spiritual growth does not happen in control, it happens in surrender. If this message touched your heart, don't treat it as something ordinary. There are moments when God speaks directly, and recognizing that is already part of the process of transformation. So don't ignore this quiet calling you just felt. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and continue on this journey. And most importantly, don't stop here. You need to watch the next video, because the more you understand how God works, the more you free yourself from what was never your place to begin with.